by and large, what I really remember most from it was clients feeling bewildered a little bit. They may not say it that way, but the scope of change, the pace of change, how it was altering what they did day to day, right? What were they used to doing day to day? What did they have to add to that process? How did the people in their groups either try to adapt to it? Sometimes you had clients, you could see who the person was who was in charge of modeling in a large tax department.
Bruce.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Bizarro Brews podcast. I'm your host, Adam, and today we have a very special guest with us today who's leading the forefront of AI tax technology at one of the leading accounting companies and one of the first Big Four guests that we have talking about tax technology over there. So welcome, John, to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic. Great to be here.
Perfect. Okay, John, so I've been going back through your background. You have a really interesting career where you have some pivots done from different analogies, and I would want to jump right through it. Start from that. You went to school at MIT. You did chemical engineering over there, but you did not even pursue engineering. You worked as a research analyst at the Brattle Group. So what happened? What was that journey like? Why that pivot? Early on in your career.
Right. Well, I mean, it wasn't, since it was an early in the career, I wouldn't even call it a pivot, right? It was like, where am I going to start? And I interviewed at engineering places. I interviewed at consultancies. And then a guy who actually was a chemical engineering graduate years ago from MIT interviewed me at Brattle. And he started exposing me to questions. He said he knew us and he known the business. I know exactly what it'll be like if you go work at one of these engineering companies or whatnot. But we solve some really interesting questions. And here's some examples. And Paul Ammon was his name. And he took me through and it was like, wow, this is really interesting. I never thought about these kinds of issues before. And this is in the world of, could be regulated utilities. It could be, environmental law. And the way in which these questions synthesize, I'm like, wow, I've always been interested in solving problems. And they had very interesting problems and a bunch of people that just, created their own consulting firm to do this. I was like, that's where I want to start. And it was an amazing place to learn the law. And then I learned, crucially for later, Microsoft Excel, economic expert witnesses, big data sets. You had to use Excel. And that, that'll thread back through later as we talk.
Did you start doing your VBA coding right off the bat too over there?
I started to learn how to do that almost right away, right? I had never really, chemical engineers don't really do that. So I didn't really know it, but I don't know, maybe something at MIT just soaked it in.
So then what were some of the things you were working on at the consulting firm? What kind of verticals and issues that got you interested in law?
Right. So what got me interested in law is that Brattle's as economic expert witnesses, they tended to be hired by folks to come up to craft arguments that would then go before a court. And crucially, right, when it comes to numbers, and again, this is going to help later, you can write the best VBA and the best Excel, but you're not going to go to a judge and a jury, right, and go, hey, look at all these awesome formulas I wrote. You have to have that analysis type, but you have to have a story behind it. What makes it so that, and so one of the cases we solved was auctioning bandwidth for cellular services as they were coming out, right? And a couple bidders won and they went bankrupt. And it was like, okay, well, how much is it actually worth? How much is the bandwidth worth? What's it near in a city? How do you craft that argument so that you can go to court with it? So, and it would be things like that. It would be environmental law issues where, I don't know, you had pollution in the ground and you had 3 or 5 different owners. Who has to cover it? Whose insurance companies do it, right? These complicated layered problems that require good analysis, but really at the end of the day, also require a good story to go along with it.
So, okay, did you craft that storytelling skill too while you were there?
I learned how it kind of went. I mean, at the end of the day, somebody who's 23 coming out of college kind of isn't ready to weave the story as needed. That's what, that's what the partners at Brattle were for. Yeah. Of course, right, as you're working with them and you're doing your part and you're starting to learn, that's what every young kid's got to do. What's my part in the overall system? And then what's yours? And I want to learn a little bit more about that. And that's where over time, working there, I got a sense a little bit more holistically how it all comes together.
Okay, next up was law school. What drove the decision? Is it just like you wanted to learn?
Well, I mean, so economic expert witnesses, unsurprisingly, they go to court, right? So a lot of their, they end up working in that environment. And, as a young kid at Brattle, really only 3 or 4 years, you got to go back and get some kind of accreditation anyway. Bachelor's from MIT, nice as that sounds, isn't going to be enough to credentialize you in front of court. So many go back to get graduate school work done anyway. And I was like, well, kind of know math, so do I really get a PhD in finance or an MBA? But this legal stuff, this law arguments that we've been doing, this is pretty neat. So might not be the best reason, the most informed reason in the world to go to school. Like, I want to learn how to solve those kind of problems next. And so Georgetown was was next on the list after Brattle.
Yeah. And then what were you studying over there? Were you wanted to become like a corporate attorney or defense lawyer?
At first, I wasn't sure. I got lucky. So in my second year, right, in law school, everybody made reference to, Martin Ginsburg, right? His tax classes were the most challenging. And I was like, ooh, well, again, say on theme. I'm like, let me go and take Marty's classes. He was great. I mean, so good. I mean, I took every class that I could with him toward my decision to stay there. And then ultimately Marty was he was of counsel at a law firm, Fried Frank. And so after having gotten to know him, having worked with him very closely, I then got to go and, work at Fried Frank. And being able to do that under, arguably, right? I mean, this is like the godfather of corporate tax, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Like, it's just
RBG's husband, right?
Exactly. So it was a really, really great place to start. And fantastic practitioner. You would talk about somebody who could tell a story and do it with humor, but at the same time, nail all this guy had it all. So it was a really great place to start.
One really interesting court case that you still remember from law school that you were like, this is unique about tax.
Well, it's anything about tax I remember. To me, it was a lot. As we were going through it, I started to, because I've always been interested in business and starting to understand if tax lawyers go too far, in their heads, they're like, wow, tax runs everything. But it doesn't. But certainly whether you recognize like how you craft things smart in tax and how do you get even more creative about it without being abusive, but creative. I started to think, all right, we can have continuation of business. We can do certain things that, otherwise that keep efficiencies going. And so you start to see tax lawyers as being this complement, a necessity in large deals. And I kind of love that part of it.
Gotcha. And then, so now you go graduate college and now you start to work in corporate law. How's that experience like? What are you working on? Are you in tax law from day one?
I'm in tax law from day one, Brattle Law School. So I'm working in that group. And I mean, this was, back, I'm going to say back in those days, I'm sure it's true now. There's a lot of work. I mean, you put in the hours big time, but if you're young and you have a hunger for it, there's kind of nothing like being able to put in those reps, right? I mean, I look back at that time and I know that there's the old saying, the only easy day is yesterday, right? So I'm making it sound easier than it was, but I had the time for it. And so, yeah, you're billing 2,400 hours a year, but the reps, like you just learn so much in that time. And now as a seasoned practitioner, I'm still benefiting from having invested that time early. It does pay back. There's no question.
Were you like focusing on specific areas of tax law at that time?
One of Fried Frank's areas at that time, and now it's even bigger for them, was asset management. And so both from hedge funds and private equity on what does it take to form a fund? How do you get investors interested to give you money, pay you for the rights to use it, right? And give you return, and then say, okay, well then from there, how do you structure, the investments that go into it? How do you get there's different foreign interests that want to come into it. And so you start to learn this whole world of what fund formation and deal work and the fund world looks like. And as long as the economy's humming, it's fast paced. Not always, right? Once Lehman fell, it was a little different. But for a while, I mean, you just couldn't do enough of it.
So if Adam wants to start like a new hedge fund tomorrow, what's the best way to raise money for it? What's the secret sauce?
Well, I mean, I don't, but hopefully, you what's the secret sauce to get the millions and the billions, right? I mean, right now you'd probably get the 3 F's, right? What are the 3 F's? Friends, fools, and family. So, no, but I don't want to, he's going, wow, John, how little do you think of me?
Yeah. No, but it's good. Okay. So friends, fools, that's like startup of any venture, right?
That's right. I would think, outside of, I would say get some experience in it first. You make some of those, it's networking, I would think at first, if you want to start tapping into the big bucks.
Okay. So then you start your work your way up through like a few different firms, and then you go to EY. What's the shift before to going to like a big 4 firm while you had the law degree and you were working in corporate law?
Well, so what had happened was, well, at least from a personal perspective, right? Marty, as he got older, he transitioned into the firm and then eventually passed. And so one can take, so at that stage, I'm like, well, do I really want to stay and, go that pathway to partner at a large law firm? And doing so is one type of practice. Continuing to do that would have taken me a little bit away from some of the core things that I was doing, right? Loving the maths, the science, kind of bringing those pieces together, which I was able to do in a small way with fund formation. But the Big Four offered a very different way of going about it, which is, hey, we'd love to have somebody who's, seasoned as a lawyer. in tax law, reading things, synthesizing it. But if we can then apply them and have them use that same, if they have the numbers background, the spreadsheeting, whatever it takes, because spreadsheets is just a way to present it. It's not like there's some magic about Excel, right? But like if you can provide, do that kind of work there was, just really, really interesting opportunities. And so EY offered that. And I'm like, all right, let me take a look at this. I think I would feel like I kind of missed out if I never tried. And so I jumped over and went to EY's M&A practice.
Interesting. Question and follow up on that is I've talked to like a few lawyers who've done that same career path where they go from corporate law to big four M&A tax work. And one of the things like sometimes they miss out on is like they miss the corporate law on how they're dealing with the clients and more of that aspect. When you're in big four, you're dealing more with like also have to like work with the accounting side and the numbers. How was that shift for you? Did you actually prefer it?
Well, so first, I think as a junior associate, it takes a while, really, as associates in law firms to get that client access. I mean, at first, the lawyers, they're a little protective of their clients. I mean, they've worked very hard to keep them in an eat what you kill kind of atmosphere. You're like, hey, I'm not putting anybody in front of my client unless I know exactly what they're going to say. So, there's a little bit of caution there. EY, when you get to the big four, there's just no time for it. You've got to get somebody who has that seasoned skill to get in there, interview a tax director at a company that's selling itself, ask pointed questions, or, sit down with a client if you're doing I did large bankruptcy type deals. You've got to be in the room kind of earlier on in your career in your 30s. And the more that you can take on and interact with clients, help them weave that was really nice. So I actually found I got much deeper client interaction much more quickly the moment I, hit doors at EY. I was like, all right, well, let me push in a bit. What is it like to be in that company? Because I had never, as a lawyer, I never saw a tax return. It's just all of a sudden, you're sitting with these people who have to deal with corporate reality, dealing with finance, ERP systems, tax sensitizing data. It was a very different world for me. And so back to complex problem solving. There was a lot of avenues to pursue there.
And then M&A tax, were you doing buy side or sell side due diligence?
It was mainly buy side, but it was some sell side as well, which is nice because doing sell side, helps you inform what you're going to do on buy side. But then I was also doing, so in addition to doing tax due diligence along with financial due diligence, I got brought into complicated modeling matters. So when you have large bankruptcies, right, these are, just massively complicated. What happens when there's cancellation of debt and where do the attributes go and how do you prove it out? And then who wants access to that and who's getting valued for those things? The area, I don't know if you've ever seen, somebody should, if they haven't sent it to you, send you the reg books for the consolidated return regulations under 1502. If you drop it, be careful. It might go through the floor downstairs. Yeah. It's so voluminous. There's logic in it, but there's a lot in there. And so trying to weave, just even understanding that from a legal perspective can be challenging, let alone saying, okay, now that I think I understand what these words mean, how do I make that work in a model where there might be intended and unintended consequences or relationships?
Yeah. Any specific industries you were focused on at that time?
And so the very first one I did was mass tort bankruptcies.
Okay.
They tend to go for a really long time. It's hard to figure out who's going to pay for the insurance. They unless you need to close it out right away. I think the one I was doing was one of the third longest mass tort bankruptcies in history in terms of from the time they were announced bankruptcy to the time they emerged. I think it was over 10 years.
So, walk us through the process. How does like a typical like bankruptcy structure work in these cases when you're working with these clients?
All right, well, let me see. Let me dig back into the memory banks here. But I think by and large, what you're trying to do is you're untangling all kinds of intercompany debts, companies that used to be in your group, and then they're outside of it. So now they're outside debtors, inside debtors. You're basically trying to get this picture of what constitutes debt in the first place, right, as opposed to equity. So who's owned it? Now that we're bankrupt, can't pay any of it out, right? Because you're not, because then, somebody might be owed a payment ahead of you. So you're trying to figure out, all right, so within the bankruptcy structure, you're trying to order who gets in line first, right? There's, there might be $100. Being insolvent means you've got $100 of debt and $40 of assets to pay for it. Who gets access to that 40? How do you get there? And then is there something about, and as a going concern, right? Creditors become equity holders. How's that going to work? There's just a lot of different variables that go into it. You'd have a whole podcast on them, my man.
Nice. Okay. Good. So you're doing this. I'm assuming you're loving it because you're there for a while. Then the shift happens. the shift happens to KPMG? What brought that on?
I changed geographies. I was in the Washington, D.C. and Tyson's Corner area for a number of years. And then I got married. We were having a son, and we had way more family in New York City than we did in Virginia. And so I moved. And, any organization, Big Four included, you move geographies. And that one was more, personally related rather than, John, there's a business need. You got to get your butt to New York right away. It changes where you sit in dispatch ladders, in terms of getting promoted. You have a different set of personalities that you're dealing with. And of course, I made that move primarily for family. No regrets.
Yeah.
But I probably ended up that from a career perspective, staying in the Virginia area would have been better for EY. And so at some point you come around to recognizing this. I came around to recognizing that fact. And it turns out that that very large bankruptcy that we were just talking about, on the other side of it was KPMG. And I got to meet one of the partners over the deal. And he's a really nice guy, super charismatic guy. And he's, joke in front of my partner at EY. Hey, if this doesn't work out, you can always come and work at KPMG. My partner, conniption, he'd be like, what the hell? Yeah. And so eventually I ended up calling him. I says, you know what? I might need to move. And so eventually, that's what I did.
Okay. So at KPMG, you're doing the same stuff, bankruptcy structure?
I was going to be doing M&A. I came in, I was all ready to be an M&A associate, but when I came in, it happened to be late November of 2016, and Trump had won the election. And little did I know, because again, I'll joke, I was just a lawyer, just an M&A guy. What do I know? I don't know much about tax reform. And behind the scenes, KPMG's, federal legislative practice, their tax practice is going nuts. They're like, we're going to have Republican Congress, Republican, White House, tax reform. It's going to happen. And so when I came in, it was December 2016 that, generally speaking, you're getting close to the holidays. There wasn't a whole ton of work to be done, but the engine of tax reform was rolling. And, I'm a new guy. I'm not that young, but I'm still new to the company. So I'm like, look, I want to make a splash. This tax reform thing seems to be something. So look, when I came in, there were these two different fledgling baby models that they'd put together just to be able to start having conversations with clients. Each was really good, and each had some things that it needed in its own way. So none was going to be a clear winner. And I was like, look, just give me a couple weeks. Let me work on this. Let me read what the underlying rules are, right? And let me come up with something that's going to be a little bit, more, well put together, right? So you can see it right there. We've synthesized everything. I did all this Excel earlier, got these models, tax law, new tax law stuff. How do you integrate it? And then that's when things really took off for me. It just completely changed direction.
So you built the initial TCJA models at KPMG?
Exactly. So then it turned into, what was the initial corporate reform model? And so, and when I first built it, I still didn't know. I didn't know very much about international tax. I had done it was a lot of corporate tax. It was a lot of domestic. And these were new areas of, I had E&P pools under 9. It's these are things I didn't even know anything about, let alone FTC. And so the first models I did were very, very good, but there was just big blanks, hey, manual entries for the international tax. And then once the full bill got passed, everything got passed and enacted in the end of 17, the model that I created wasn't good enough because it needed to have that international tax engine behind it. I did not know how that worked. And so there became the thing I built was really, really good. They being, the international tax practice, KPMG was going to take that model and go their own route with it to try to build in the international tax engine. And then I would have, which is okay, I would have gone back and done M&A, but I really like this modeling thing. So I got added to the project kind of the last second just as a consultant. And I could see, I was like, wow, there are aspects of this, especially the foreign tax credit module. Nobody wanted to program it. They're like, I don't know. And so it's one of those things where, again, this is a young practitioner. Again, I don't care whether you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever it is. This is that moment where you go, nobody else wants to do it. It's hard, but if we get it done and we do it right, I can own this. And so, I like to joke. There's an old joke about pressure. And the definition of pressure is betting, $50 on making a shot in basketball, and you only have $20 in your pocket. You better hit that shot or else, right? So I says, I'll program the thing. And so I spent weekends studying the rules on foreign tax credits, how they apply, how it works in this zone, and that module that I built largely still exists today in what we're using mass internally as a foreign tax credit engine. Cause it was all right, I got to get it right, and so it worked. And so then it became, you're right. So then we'll build out other parts of it. And so it became very, very centralized as basically me and one other guy, the main co-developers of KPMG's TCJA and now post OB3.
So now it basically, if I understand it correctly, so basically you drop an XML file, extracts all the data, puts it out into like the different buckets, and then you can like extrapolate it based on like the different functionalities you guys are doing.
Even better than that, I don't want, because I don't want, I start with your tax return. I'm going too far back in time. I got to get data that's coming from your current systems so I can paint the picture of what you look like this quarter or this year, or a predictive model 3 years from now. So let's see where you are, and then let's grow it by a certain percentage or whatever you want to do, and now create a holistic model year over year, because I want to capture carry forwards, carry back, right? So it does all of those things, but how you link that into the data that you get from the clients is you're trying to get you got to get a lot closer to tax sensitized data, or if I have to do the tax sensitization, I want to get closer to the book.
You're actually getting the GL data in this place.
That's right. That's right.
Wow. Okay. So did you go on a roadshow basically to pitch it to the clients and doing the demoing?
Yes. And I did. And, that's a really, really important part of this as well, which is, and this is where when you look at, and I would love it. You sound the first of the big, when you get to talk to the other big four or even whatever the levels are, tax technology sometimes runs into a challenge, which is groups that are dedicated to it. Is because traditionally speaking, they're not tax people. They understand tech and they can empower the tax department to do things, right? But, whether, internal tax at KPMG or company tax. But the idea being they're waiting for you. They're almost like AI today, like, hey, the flashing cursor, just tell me what do you want me to do? And man, watch how I can do it. And then you have the tax people who generally aren't that good with the tech, and they go, I know all the rules. And so if it's just sending requirements over the fence to each other, it just takes a long time to get out there and build it. If you get people within a tax tech group who understand some of the tax, but have an affinity for tech, kind of bring those, it's like bridging two gaps. You bring them closer together and then spare a thought for the moment for a standard tax partner at any place. And it could be, right, their job is to understand their client, understand their client's business, bring to them things that they understand the client needs. But that tax partner is not going to be deep in the modeling, right? And they may only have certain depths in the actual tax, like the tax knowledge base that needs to go into the model. What they really want, and this is what I did, is said, hey, can we get the guy who built the model to go out there who understands these tax rules? And so in case fastballs are coming about how the model works in a tax technology, in a tax technical area, that guy can answer it. And so that's what I did. It was road shows. I had questions. I had people going, what about 1.861-8? And I was like, all right, this is how it does it, right? Just to try to get comfortable that the model was able to cover things at
so depth. Basically you're like basically a startup inside of KPMG at this point.
They were really good. It's very entrepreneurial, and they were really, really good to let me do it. And I'm glad, it all worked out.
Okay. Any memorable stories from that time, from the demos and the road shows?
Let's see. Aside from a, major retailer, I remember just getting grilled for like 2 hours. Well, how does it deal with this? And how does it deal with it? And the person was really, really inquisitive and nice. But I just remember it was like exhausting. Like, man, I did some prep to come into it, so definitely remembering those pieces of it. But by and large, what I really remember most from it was clients feeling bewildered a little bit. They may not say it that way, but the scope of change, the pace of change, how it was altering what they did day to day, right? What were they used to doing day to day? What did they have to add to that process? How did the people in their groups either try to adapt to it? Sometimes you had clients, you could see who the person was who was in charge of modeling in a large tax department. They would see this whiz bang new model that I created, and they would just either try to poke holes in it or later just kind of go, it's not that good. And it wasn't necessarily because the model wasn't good, but it was because they were protecting their turf, right? The last thing I could do is take a look at their model and tell them kid's ugly, this is not going to work. But that turf protecting and not wanting to change, there's a constant right there. Cause boy, if we were talking about AI, the same kind of thing, right? So that good seeing those early on, cause that's now informing some of the things I'm doing today.
So then let's say there's a young manager or senior manager now his job is now to go to sell, and these clients are being protective of their in-house stuff and they don't want to change and give it out to the big four. What would you advise them how to approach that situation? What
I would do is this is where you need to have, I think the important thing here is being able to pivot and to talk about other things that aren't just, the other problem that tax tech people get into is they all right, so you guys want me to do a demo of this tool? Here's the demo of the tool. And they create, it's not a script, but they just do the same kind of thing over and over again. It's their desire to get out of their body. Hey, this is what I want to show you, right? But having a client conversation is not about what I, as the provider, want to show the client. It's what's their pain point and what's their difficult spot. And so you need to do even more, right? You need to understand how to present what you're doing. But now that you know there's going to be these internal challenges, how do you deal with that? How do you tell them, look, so one of the things I would do is I would say, yeah, I mean, we've captured the way the rules work today. But as you know, and this was true back in 2018, 19, 2020, regulatory changes are coming. The IRS and Treasury have said this is going to need change. There's going to be further modifications. So if you think it was hard to adapt from pre-TCJA to now, wait until you get 3,000 pages of foreign tax credit regs. Maintenance is an issue, right? Building something, I don't want to say it's easy, but it is not the end of the road. Maintenance is a major piece of it. And trying to bring somebody like that along board saying, hey, as this maintenance goes through, we'll show you how to use it. We'll teach you, some of what the rules are that go into it so that you become the power user within your firm. We're not trying to supplant you and move you out or take your modeling away. It's about trying to make certain things that are going to be really, really hard in the future to do. Let's make that part easier so you can focus, so you can focus those energies elsewhere towards value add for the organization.
And so then your role now is different. Now you guys are leading this new initiatives at KPMG. It's called Ignition over here. How did that role come about? What is Ignition doing these days?
Right. So Ignition had actually been around. I was brought into the group. They'd been around for a number of years. And I think the mission statement, if you will, was, look, tax practitioners their job is to understand tax rules, understand the companies they work for, stay on top of that, and help those companies meet the challenges of the day. There is no way that same kind of person who has, or generally speaking, is not easy for that kind of tax partner, right? That relationship partner to then understand all the ways in which technology can enable this delivery or, make it easier to do, not because you're trying to get fewer feet, make it easier to do so you can do more stuff, the stuff you couldn't even get to. That's what we help you with. So what you want to do is create like this centralized tech SWAT team aimed at tax. So they eventually learn some tax fastballs, but Ignition is going to stay on top of what's changing in the world of technology and how you can apply it to your engagements. And partner will be there with you hand in hand. Don't worry. If it's a difficult situation, you and your teams don't have to implement it. We'll help you implement. That's the kind of concept. And so eventually as that system grows, you get people, you can't have full tax generalists within a technology group, right? Who's a full tax generalist anymore? They start to learn, right? You accompany state and local tax people. We have people in our tax tech group that do that. I work on transfer pricing. We got a team that can help with that, right? That's the kind of thing it's just who's going to help us stay on top of the tech so we know how to deliver. And that's what Ignition does.
Gotcha. And then what's your role right now?
So my role within Ignition is Chief Data Officer for tax. And by and large, what that means is thinking about data and centralizing it and enabling it. Not that I want to make everything a sports analogy, but hey, we got the World Cup, so let's go for it, right? You got offense and defense. And data and analytics, defense to me is you need it, right? It's the pipelining. We're built on Microsoft, Azure, moving to Fabric. We're able to link certain things together and we're going to create. So KPMG, everybody should go look at Digital Gateway, right? It is that amazing centralized platform for us to bring data, build analytical tools on the same architecture so they can speak to one another. So you start getting those efficiencies, right? You want to build something towards that. But going back to the data, that's a defensive side. That sets the ground. You need that. Offense to me, and this is where it leads into my business side, which was, all right, so now we have all this information about our clients. What are we doing with it to help them even more? And so, for example, right, think about large institution. This is why it's good to talk to KPMG, right? A large institution like that, I've got people in California and Chicago and Florida and Texas and New York, right? And so dissemination of good ideas isn't always easy. You would think like, hey, everybody knows what everybody else is doing. That's not really it's hard to know that. And so I might have somebody in Chicago come up with it's a really neat planning idea. And they might share it with their partners in Chicago. It might get a little bit of voice, but it might be limited. So what the data office would come in and we would say is, okay, that's a really neat planning idea. And I see how this new change in R&D or Section 250, FDII, like what are the data elements? If a client of ours was to be a good candidate for this thing that you found and discovered and wanted, what would it take? They need to have a lot of undeducted interest expense carry forwards. Do they need to have a lot of inventory? What gets it to the point you go, hey, that's the thing I want. So now if you're telling me that, I can link in, I can find data that I have all around tax function. I can then link that into our engagement systems and whatnot so that I might be able to find 20 other client ideas. And that'll help every geo. And I can go and talk to them directly and say, you might not even have known this about your client, but on the basis of these facts, we think they're a good candidate for this opportunity. But it requires a different way of thinking, right? People just go, hey, I'm a tax guy. I figured out or tax gal. I figured out this idea and we should run with it. Trying to think about it as data forward, which is, and what are the data elements of that exactly? We don't have to get it, but like, what should it look like? And so every time you're framing an idea, if you can start to frame it as data elements as well, now you can create this database of neat ideas. They keep changing the rules, run it. You go back and refresh it and run it again. So you're automating the way in which you find ideas or find, suitable clients. So I can go, because the whole goal is we're business partner clients. I want to show you this neat thing could apply to you. Do you want to look or not? But it could. Rather than just saying, hey, let me look under the hood at all your data. Maybe I'll find something. Like nobody wants to have that conversation. They want to have somebody come to you and go, you might have $125,000 a year to get benefit here and take nothing to get it. You want to go for it or not?
Gotcha. And then I want to talk about I see that bigger firms have really good initiatives, but I think the adoption rate in the individual offices always remains a key issue, where the adoption within the actual practitioners, because that's one, I would say they have so much work on their plates as well. Like they have to deal with client, their compliance, provisions, consulting work, and there's an endless amount of work coming that way. But so adoption isn't the top priority for the professionals from the tech team coming in for the initiatives. How do you see that challenge, and how do you guys seeing that being implemented and overcoming it?
There's a good challenge. I'm gonna liken it as well, because your point being, part of the reason adoption is low is because they're bombarded with information, right? Why should they listen to you, John? I got 10 other people writing me emails and they're sending me ideas. So from there, what I think you really need to do is you either have to have, I think you have to have company to both things. Somebody in my position, I'm not trying to give myself bruises on the shoulder, patting myself, but being charismatic, meeting people, knowing, so a lot of the partners within my group know, hey, listen, I'm on your side. I want to find this work. I know what the challenges are that you're facing. Let me help. Always let me help you, not, hey, I got to talk to you because you're helping me, right? You don't go that route. The second thing is having good firm-wide, not command and control. Hey, all partners, you must listen to this thing, but you create a culture of we are going to pursue certain things together, and the data initiatives, right, is one of the things that we got to get behind this. And you really have a good top-down approach where they just have a consistent message. And then I'm there to go, hey, all right, I'll bring my team out. Every 6 months, we'll talk to you again about ideas. If you want, just take half an hour with your group. You're going to have a meeting anyway. Just take a little bit of time to talk about what we might do for you. And here's some success stories. And you kind of want to tell people, this is why it works. It's worked for others. You've got revenue goals and sales goals like anybody else. Come on, you want to give this thing, come on, give the tax data office a spin here. I think it's that persistence without being overly persistent on my end to try to get them to use it, and having good top down, this is one of these things we've got to look at, and you combine that into a winning formula.
Gotcha. And then, so what are some of the initiatives you're really excited about in the future coming? And then do you think AI plays into a lot of that?
Ooh, all right. Well, the AI question, that's a big one altogether. So let me hit on that one. I mean, I'll probably not dive too deep into specific examples of the things that I'm excited about. But what gets me generally excited is having centralized teams that are recognizing opportunities that either we missed or something didn't work at one client with, hey, we're going to fix that. And let's go find any other places, and just organizing at a national level. Identification both of opportunities and issues, so that you're saying, hey, listen, and there might be 100 of them, but we can't do 100. We can prioritize 10 because that's where we think we're going to get the largest return on investment, and let's do it. And teaming with those business thinkers, right? The people who are saying, hey, listen, we're trying to look at what we need to be doing 6, 12, 24 months from now. I really, really like that. You mentioned, you put two little letters together there, and those are big ones. AI. That's probably been, AI, these days, within the past 12 months, it occupies a massive chunk of the time that I have. And I don't mean that just in work hours. Once we're done, I'll be back into Claude, working up, spinning up new things that we might do in the practice to try to get in furtherance of things we just talked about today. Everyone's going to use the word disruptive. I just think it's a huge change. We're all trying to figure out what it means. And in the meantime, some people are getting out ahead of us in our groups, and we're trying to just ride that slipstream. What are you doing? What are you doing? How do we share info? How do we build architecture to get there? It's a wild ride right now.
I'm assuming with KPMG released Claude to all of their users worldwide. All of their employees has been released, and people are going to come up with so many examples of their ways of doing skills, or doing specific examples of how they increase their output. how do you like find the best examples that could be like spread across to KPMG? Because it's a big organization.
Yeah.
And for those initiatives, how do you get like, because people are going to come up with really, really interesting use cases. How do you find them and then you push them out to the broader organization?
Right. Well, mercifully, when it comes to Claude, right? So we announced 2 months ago that Gateway would be powered by Claude, right? So not like we're going to thread Claude through this to get that agent harness. But this is the first time we released AI to the, at LLMs and that kind of power to the whole group, right? We did about 2 or 3 years ago with OpenAI and GPT. And it went to the same kind of thing. I mean, you highlighted a number of the issues, which is as an organization, you don't want to double and triple build things. And you certainly don't now, right? Back then, if it was licensed per head, right, blow some tokens. What's the big deal? Since everybody's moving away from that, I don't want, Claude Fable writing emails, come on guys, turn the knob down. But what you do then, and the idea that worked at first, we started with, hey, you want to give it to everybody. You got to democratize it. And let's just let 1,000 flowers bloom. Like, I don't know. So the ideas will come out and we'll harness them that way. And that worked for a bit. But at the end of the day, you still kind of get back. Remember when we were talking about ignition? You want to have the tax technology type people. I think what you ended up seeing was in order to not just to prevent double building, but to really make one or two things collect. Really, it was like you'd have these 3 solutions. They'd be really great if they were unified. You ended up having to do a system where you went a little bit away from democratization to solve all the problems to, hey, we've started to identify areas that are common themes. Let's focus on those and let's put people and teams behind them and incent them differently to build those out in a way that will be really transformative for the function. And so I would say, if 2 years ago we were pursuing 100 avenues, we slimmed it to 15, said, hey, we got to do these ones. This is what we got to get in the system, right? So having experienced that, now as we're rolling Claude out, we're going to have, it's this kind of the same architecture, but we're going to have to use the lessons we learned from the past. How do we get skills in people's hands so we're not building the same skill 5 times? How do we learn how to thread skills together and then kind of force the harness? Like if I have like an awesome set, how do I force the harness to kind of like call them in order to orchestrate? How do I architect it? You're going to have all the more focus, I think, on teams who understand how Claude works, how harnesses work, where that's going. And then how do you then go to the next layer down from that, which is, okay, well, now what are the processes we have and how do we develop it?
Yeah.
It's going to be a coordinated effort.
And how far do you think we are from like adoption in these bigger accounting firms, from using local models for like the day-to-day stuff that does not require the horsepower of the frontier model, and then going to the frontier model for the harder stuff? Like you don't want to write an email with Fable 5, as you said, right? You want to bund those tokens on there. An open source model can probably get you there for most of the stuff that you're doing.
Exactly. And so because of that, yeah, I mean, if I don't want to call them small language models versus large language models, but to your point, there is a push toward, and I know teams that are looking into, which is, okay, are there some set of tasks that we're doing that, you keep it, again, out of the frontier, keep the token costs low, the engagement costs low. And then as you're saying, ramp up. And I think, even as we're talking about, and this is me hypothesizing as we're continuing to do the rollout, which is in order to be able to get these models to be able turned on at higher thinking or to even get access to something like a Fable someday, or high level Opus, we're going to have people do training. Okay. And training and understanding when should you use these things? How should you use them? What are the kinds of things you want to do with it? And then what are the tools you want to use to get there? Not that people have to then follow that as like a playbook, but I do think that a lot of folks just don't understand that, trying to harness haiku through things like, it's dropping stuff, it's missing things. Like Sonnet's probably enough. Like you don't need to opus that one, right? No. But hey, I got to do complex creation and we got coding. I'm trying, well, all right, for at least a couple of these, you got to be, let's sit back, high level architect with our, Opus or Fable even. That's what I use at home. Like, what? I want to take this massive thing and make it bigger or make it smarter. How do I do that? Like, I don't want to build anything. Help me think that through. It's this kind of muscle memory that's going to be interesting to try to inject across a tax function, right? Because this is generally not what lawyers and accountants do. We'll see.
And then in terms of like KPMG, how much work are you guys like actually doing in-house compared to also relying upon like third-party providers or outside providers to come in? And because there's been a lot of investment in tax, a lot of companies are very well funded coming in now. So there's a lot of tools in the market. So what is the focus of building versus buying right now?
I was going to say, like, build buy is always on the table. And I think, I don't want to say that it's always a case by case basis, but I mean, in a certain sense, it sort of is. I mean, you can have centralized enterprise innovation, groups that serve not just the tax function, right, but serve the firm in general. So they're making sure we're making smart decisions there. Certainly from within tax, we don't have a build, we got to build it all ourselves kind of thing, because we know we can't. There's certain elements of things that we're not that, we're just not as talented as third parties. And so it's about working them in and getting, we do use them. Now, I would say from a investment perspective, right, a digital gateway that we have is amazing, right? And we continuously want to build on that platform and make it stronger and get the network effect of adding more and more things there to make it stronger. So certainly if it's something that we can use and then present to people on our main user and client interface, let's do it. But there's so many other considerations going to build by. I wouldn't even know how to get into them all.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we talked about like the investment. I want to talk about the ROI on investment. How do you internally measure this? At our company, we think about like, okay, what is the net time spent in AI getting generated the output, and then minus time spent actually reviewing the AI output equals to like the net benefit for us is one of the metrics that I look at. Is because if I ask for a tax opinion, it generated, how much time did I actually would have done? Is it higher or lower than what I would have done on my own?
Right. And we're trying to, I think for us to do something similar to that, to even be able to make that basis, right? I mean, it sounds easy the way you just put it. Why not? Everybody should do that. Yeah. But really knowing, well, how many hours, like you're saying it used to take you 50 and now it's taking you 30. How do you really know that? Or how does somebody at a management level really know how much time it took? Now, at a large organization, we'd have a lot of reps in things like tax compliance, tax modeling. And so it's trying to come up with reasonable metrics to understand what that time looked like. And then, hey, now that we're going to put these pieces in, we're going to have, because you're going to say, hey, listen, it's 30 hours now instead of 50. But the solution, if you took 80 hours to build it and now it's 30, like, well, I used to do it in 50, now it's 110. You got to be able to say, hey, that 80 I spent building is going to be distributed across a lot of different projects. So I think there's a couple different ways of slicing that metric. But the one thing we all, anybody should be really worried about is, am I building a $5 million AI solution to take care of something that like I was doing for $2 million with people like that? I don't know. If you don't come up with some other, ROI on that front end, just because we can do it in AI doesn't mean that we should. And I think you were even getting at it. Just because you could do it in a frontier model doesn't mean you should, right? Those kind of things. I think we're all going to learn a little bit about that too over the next year or two in the, applying it and doing it in the field. Yeah.
Any wins you want to talk about in your time you've seen so far with like AI implementation?
The only one that strikes me is, and I think it's great for us to offer to our clients access to these models, to AI throughout our delivery platform. But we do need to be cognizant that sometimes clients don't want to use that, right? Or some clients may have said, hey, we already signed a contract to use, you name it, OpenAI, Gemini, Claude, whatever it is. Like we've got that. And so we're a little bit less interested about how you're threading it through Gateway, but we don't know what the hell we're doing. No, they won't say it that way, but we could use some training on how that works and how we integrate back into the work we're doing with you. And so I think it's just as important for us to be able to help them on their journey, even if it's not the way that, like, hey, I want you over here on our platform, do it. That's fine, right? We have to understand that our clients need to be able to make their own decisions on these things. And it's how do we nevertheless enable them? Because again, we're your business partners. What are we doing to help you? And maybe sometimes it's going to them instead of bringing them to us.
Interesting. And then I know like a few like tax transformation leaders listen to this podcast. Like, what would you talk with them? Like, let's say they're outside, not a part of the Big Four, not even part of the top 25, but they're big enough that they have a role and their company is thinking about tax transformation. What are some of the learnings you have seen yourself, and what would you tell them? How to get started? What are the best practices to implement, and how to like go about like implementing AI and the use cases for their companies?
My gut would be, gosh, if you have somebody in your group who's kind of curious about this stuff, give them some space to run with it, right? Because the most interesting things that we've found internally in our own firm are people who are just like, yeah, I like this stuff and I've kind of been tinkering with it and I want to show you. I'm like, all right, let's go, right? Because that kind of love for it. And I think, from there, I'm an increment. So, empower the people in your group who are actually going to help implement it, and then be incrementalist, right? We don't always need to hit home runs or whatever. Like, it doesn't have to be big. You should have in mind big wins and what really good could look like. Always ask yourself what success looks like, but you don't want the problem starting with too big a solution all at once. I always view it as like you're I'm trying to build a tower to the clouds. So I start in the clouds and I build downward, and then the ground moves on me by the time I get there. And this whole thing doesn't work, right? And it took so long to do. Try to find some small wins that you say, hey, if I could get this in, this would be really good. And I think it wouldn't take a lot of time to do. And then find those medium and longs. And I think what you'll find is as you get those small wins, it's kind of like walking down a foggy path. I'm walking down a road and it's foggy, right? I know where I want to get to, but I can't see the end well. Just start going, right? The fog starts to clear and you start to see a turn to the right or a turn to the left. You don't have to solve the whole road before you start. Sometimes it's good to just get a couple baby wins in there, and that helps you figure out where you want to go.
Okay, that's like really important. I agree with that. I always tell people like, just ask Claude if you just don't even know where to start.
The only tool maybe in history that teaches you how to use it. Not bad.
Yeah. So that's like really important. Nice. Any personal stuff you've been working on? Like, do you find any fun use cases for Claude yet that you said you're thinking with Claude?
I'm a tax director. I get emails all the time about news or changes in law that affect me. Can AI do that? Like, can it just go and scrape and bring to me interesting things? Which, of course, is a big question. You're like, well, it's got to scrape everything, and then it's got to determine whether it's applicable and material to you, right? But trying to play around with, what would that look like? Everybody doing these designs, ultimately, if you want to come up with something that works, you're thinking, what's the core thing I needed to do? Like, what's that, and I got to then serve it up, right? Like, you can find this is back to my economic expert witness days. You can have the most tight analysis in the world. If you don't tell the story and make it digestible, it doesn't matter. You never made it out of the starting gate. So designing legislative trackers or, there's be so many other different things that, I'm not like, well, I'll keep some of my stuff under my desk. But thinking about design, you have to think about how someone's going to ingest it. And then you always kind of at the other end, you have to think a little bit about maintenance, right? Just because you built it, great, it's going to give me the laws of today. Unless it's fine 2 weeks from now, 4 weeks. How do you validate that? Can you even use AI to help you do the validation? Because you let that thing go too far on its own, and all of a sudden it's full of errors. And you're like, well, what happened? And you find back, it made anyway. So lots of challenges out there, but every time I see that, I think there's opportunity.
Yeah. No, this has been great. I honestly enjoyed all of it. Like, I loved getting nerd out about AI and implementation into tax technology. I know the audience would have loved it. So thank you so much for your time today, John.
Of course.
And as always, to my audience, stay curious. This is Adam signing off from Bizarro Brews.
Yeah. Brews.